Before we get started, if you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. Now let's dive into recap. Anthia is the luckiest isekai female protagonist I've ever seen. Upon opening her eyes, she had already married her favorite man from the novel. Anthia's heaven-sent husband was the cursed crown prince of the empire. Prince Blake had married Anthia when they were very young. However, on their wedding day, Anthia was so frightened by Blake's cursed, disfigured face that she jumped into the river in an attempt to commit suicide out of humiliation and anger. According to the original novel, Anthia drowned. But thanks to the protagonist's soul possessing her, Anthia didn't die. She was rescued by Blake. After taking bitter medicine for several days and talking with various people in the palace, the protagonist realized the truth. She had transmigrated. She had entered the world of a novel she had read in her previous life. Actually, the female lead of that novel wasn't Anthia. It was Diana. Anthia was Diana's half-sister, sharing the same father. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that Blake was her favorite character in the novel. His tragic fate had broken her heart, and now she had the chance to change his dark future. She couldn't stand idly by. Anthia lay in bed, organizing her thoughts. She had been awake for 5 whole days, but Blake never came to see her. He must have been devastated. His bride had tried to kill herself just from seeing his face. Who wouldn't be heartbroken? Anthia got out of bed and asked the maid to take her to see the crown prince. The maid assumed Anthia wanted to say goodbye and asked her to wait. Anthia smiled and replied, "Don't worry. Just take me there." Freshly groomed and dressed, Anthia followed the maid. They arrived at the entrance to the crown prince's bedchamber. Anthia gently pushed open the door and called out softly, "Your Highness, it's me." Hearing the girl's voice, young Blake curled up into a ball and hid under the covers, as if terrified that his cursed face would frighten her again. "Don't come closer." Anthia immediately stopped. Seeing the prince trembling pitifully, she sighed, then stepped forward and yanked the blanket off Blake with a whoosh. As the blanket fell away, Blake saw Anthia's face clearly for the first time. Blake instinctively exclaimed, "You can't." Realizing Anthia was simply staring at him, Blake's little face turned bright red. He buried it in the pillow. What are you doing? How dare you strip me of my blanket?" Anthia was speechless. "Strip what off? If you don't speak clearly, people will misunderstand." So this was the dark and depressed Blake from the novel? In reality, he was a pitiful little white rabbit. Anyway, first she needed to clear up the misunderstanding. Anthia touched the mask on Blake's face and then, with a whoosh, removed it. Blake was terrified. Anthia reached out and touched the part of his face covered with black curse marks. Blake turned away, not letting her look. Anthia spoke seriously. "You are beautiful, Your Highness." Little Rabbit Blake opened his pitiful, wide eyes, thinking he had misheard. The next moment, Anthia cupped his face in both hands and earnestly said, "I have never seen anyone as beautiful as you." Looking at Anthia's sincere, smiling face, Blake's heart felt like a herd of little deer were running wild inside it. Anthia carefully examined the crown prince's face. Although the black curse marks covered the left side, his bright eyes, high nose bridge, full lips, and smooth jawline all showcased the exquisiteness of his features. The original novel said that once Blake met Diana, the curse would be lifted, and he would become the most handsome man on the continent. Blake stared at Anthia with a pure and innocent gaze, just like a little white rabbit. But he was still upset about Anthia jumping into the river. Noticing this, Anthia quickly explained, "Your Highness, I wasn't trying to kill myself back then. I just slipped and accidentally fell into the lake." She was lying. In the novel, Anthia had indeed attempted suicide because of Blake's appearance. But now, she chose to call it an accident because she truly liked him. Blake asked quietly, "Really?" Anthia assured him it was true and added that she had come specially to thank him. Hearing this, days of bottled-up emotions welled up in Blake's heart. Tears flowed uncontrollably. Between sobs, he said, "I thought you tried to kill yourself because of me. I was afraid you'd blame me for saving you because I look so ugly." Seeing Blake so weak and pitiful, Anthea felt a mix of emotions. So during these 5 days she had been unconscious, Blake had been worrying the whole time. Anthea pulled him into her arms. "Your Highness, I like you. Don't overthink anymore." Blake tightly hugged her shoulders and replied, "I like you too." Anthea knew he was lying. In the novel, Blake liked her sister Diana. After the Emperor found out, he proposed the marriage to Diana's family. But Baron Bella absolutely refused. So he married Anthea off instead. Knowing all this, Anthea didn't mind. Sometimes, the world needed kind lies. Then, Anthea made her first invitation to Blake. "Then, shall we share a bed from now on?" Blake was shocked. He hugged his knees and retreated, his expression terrified. Even his voice trembled. Anthea silently scolded him in her heart. "Hey yo, Mr. Subhero, why do you look so alarmed?" It turned out that Anthea's family possessed light energy, an energy that could eliminate the curse on Blake. But to make it effective, physical contact was necessary. The more intimate the contact, the stronger the treatment. After thinking carefully, Anthea proposed holding hands while sleeping. Blake looked as if he were on the verge of tears, like he had been bullied. Anthea quickly explained, "Your Highness, please don't misunderstand me. We are married, so it's only natural that we sleep together." Blake hugged a pillow to his chest and buried his face in it, shyly. Anthea was a little speechless. Where was the wild, charming Blake from the novel? The boy in front of her was clearly just a little white rabbit. Would this rabbit really turn into the brooding beast 10 years later? Anthea clenched her fists silently, vowing not to let him down. Then, she pulled the pillow away from his chest, grabbed his tender little hand, and said, "We're already husband and wife. So, we need to sleep together every day." Blake's face turned even redder. Seeing Blake's reluctant expression, Anthea asked, "What's wrong? Are you unwilling?" Blake quickly explained, "No, I'm just afraid you'll mind. After all, I'm so ugly." Anthea gave him a sweet smile. "Of course I don't mind, because I like you the most." Hearing this, Blake's head practically steamed. "She said she likes me." Anthea held the Crown Prince's small hand tightly and asked with concern, "How are you feeling? Is your body any better?" She was trying hard to transmit the light energy within her, but Blake just looked embarrassed. He didn't feel anything. In the novel, Diana only had to hold Blake's hand to ease the pain of the curse. Could it be that because Anthea was just a supporting character, her energy wasn't as effective as Diana's? Seeing that Blake had no reaction, Anthea sighed. "It seems my power isn't enough." Just as she was about to turn away, Blake grabbed the hem of her clothes. "Don't go." Blake hugged her from behind and said softly, "Anthea, your hand is so nice and warm." The next moment, Blake took the initiative to grab Anthea's hand. With his big, tearful eyes, he begged, "Please don't leave." Anthea smiled gently and assured him, "I'm not leaving. I just wanted to move the blanket aside." Hearing this, Blake's small face turned crimson. He curled up into a ball again. Looking at the shy Blake, Anthea asked with a playful smile, "Don't you want to sleep with me?" Blake stammered, "Do you really not mind sleeping with a monster like me?" Anthea became slightly angry. "Your Highness, please stop calling yourself a monster." Blake was clearly frightened by Anthea's tone and curled up even tighter. But Anthea reached out and held his small hand. "Your Highness, your curse will be lifted. You're not a monster at all." Blake couldn't believe it. Anthea told him gently, "When you turn 18, the curse will be completely lifted. After that, your life will be incredibly happy." Blake was half skeptical. 18 years old felt very far away to an 8-year-old. He whispered, "Actually, no one with this curse has ever lived past 18. But in the novel, once Blake met Diana, the curse was lifted. Anthea hooked her pinky with Blake's and made a promise. "I swear, this curse won't affect your Highness. I swear on my life." The next second, Blake suddenly stood up and shouted, "No, don't swear on your life so casually." He trembled and said, "You can't die. Even for me, you have to live." Anthea held Blake's trembling hand and smiled. Neither you nor I will die. So don't worry. Blake's emotions were like a roller coaster. He cried pitifully. Anthea took out a handkerchief and wiped his tears, teasing, "My dear husband is such a crybaby." Blake refused to admit it. "I'm not a crybaby." Anthea wrung out the tear-soaked handkerchief and said with mock seriousness, "Then why is my handkerchief all wet?" Blake cried even harder. "I'm not." This back and forth continued several times until Blake finally buried himself in Anthea's arms, sobbing loudly. "I'm not." Anthea smiled wryly and gently patted his back. All right, I know you're not. Don't cry, don't cry." With Anthea's childlike comfort, Blake soon fell asleep. Early the next morning, Anthea opened her eyes groggily and found that Blake hadn't let go of her hand all night. She gently stroked his hair. Blake slowly opened his eyes and gave her a sweet, harmless smile. Anthea didn't understand why he looked so happy. Blake explained, "Because you're lying by my side." Such a straightforward statement made Anthea blush. The morning sun shone through the palace windows. With Blake still holding Anthea's hand, unwilling to let go, the two lay in bed. Everything seemed so peaceful and beautiful. After several days together, Anthea discovered that unless there was something urgent, Blake never left the room. He ate and studied there, too. Not only that, during meals, Anthea noticed something strange. For 4 consecutive days, breakfast, lunch, and dinner consisted only of vegetables. Could it be Blake is really a rabbit? Moreover, the vegetable dishes were very limited. Even the soup was just leftovers from the previous night. At lunch, staring at a table full of vegetables, Anthea asked, "Your Highness, what do you usually like to eat?" Blake replied, "I'm not picky." Anthea stuffed a tasteless vegetable into her mouth and asked, "Do you like meat or seafood?" Blake nodded without hesitation, which confused Anthea. He wasn't a vegetarian, and although he was cursed, there were no special dietary restrictions. So the reason he ate vegetables and leftover soup every day could only be one thing. Someone was mistreating him. Although they were the crown prince and princess, they were still young and powerless. So others looked down on them. Currently, the steward of the crown prince's palace was the eldest son of Marquis Ham. The more Anthea thought about it, the more upset she became. They'd gone too far, treating Blake this way. Blake, seeing Anthea's downcast expression, had no idea what she was thinking. He assumed the food wasn't to her taste. Seeing his innocent and gullible face, Anthea set down her knife and fork. She asked the maid to summon the steward to her room. There was something she needed to confirm personally. In the meantime, she forked a mushroom and brought it to Blake's lips. Blake frowned. "I don't like mushrooms," Anthea replied. "You have to learn to eat them. They're good for you." Blake obediently opened his mouth, closed his eyes, and swallowed the mushroom without chewing. After swallowing, he looked proud. "I ate it," he said. Then he took Anthea's hand and, looking deeply into her eyes, said, "Antha, your hand is so nice and warm. Whenever I hold it, I feel better." Antha thought he was so cute. She smiled and asked Blake to finish the rest of the mushrooms. The steward, being the Marquis's son, didn't take young Antha seriously at all. She sat in the chair, questioning him. "Why is the crown prince's diet so monotonous?" The steward pushed his glasses up carelessly and replied perfunctorily, "You called me over just for this? I thought it was some kind of emergency." Antha was a bit angry. She told the steward, "The crown prince is the light of the empire. If his diet can't even be guaranteed, isn't that an emergency?" Hearing light of the empire, the steward snorted coldly. Then he smiled and explained, "The crown prince's palace budget is insufficient. The prince didn't provide funds, so there's nothing I can do." Antha saw through the steward's lie immediately. Even if the crown prince's palace budget was tight, it couldn't be so bad that they couldn't even afford a piece of meat. She sighed. The steward folded his arms and snorted again. The next second, Antha, with a serious expression, told the man before her, "You're dismissed." The steward's jaw dropped in shock. His anger ignited instantly. He gritted his teeth in disbelief. What did you say? Antha, her face calm, turned to the guard beside her. Hamel has committed the serious crime of embezzlement. Effective immediately, he is to be locked in prison. This case must be thoroughly investigated. The guard stepped forward to restrain the steward. Still not realizing the seriousness of the situation, the steward struggled and cursed. Do you know who I am? I'm the heir to the Hamel family. You just married a monster, and now you dare to flaunt your power in front of me? Antha turned her head away, unwilling to hear such filthy words. She imperiously issued another command. Add one more charge, insulting the crown prince and princess. The guard respectfully nodded and dragged the steward away. The steward continued struggling. The guard gave a sinister smile and boom, knocked the steward unconscious before taking him away. After Antha dealt with the steward, the atmosphere in the crown prince's palace became very tense. But Antha chose not to ease the tension. Instead, she dismissed all irresponsible people in the palace. The novel once wrote that after Blake was stripped of his crown prince position, most people in the palace betrayed him and chose to support the male lead, Richard. Antha listed all of those people from memory and drove them all out. Afterward, the crown prince's palace became nearly empty, with barely anyone left. Maid Melissa was very worried that Antha's actions would anger the emperor. After all, the palace servants were personally selected by him. Antha said it was fine. No need to worry about that. When mealtime came again, Antha found there was no one left in the palace to cook. She had driven the chef away too. But this was no problem for Antha. She smiled and told the maid, I'll cook today. Earlier, while walking around the palace, she had discovered some interesting things. Antha took the maid to the kitchen and opened the door to a storage room. She excitedly showed Melissa what she had found. Melissa asked in surprise, What is this? Before their eyes were 2 clay pots. Antha opened them for Melissa to see what was inside. Melissa looked curiously. Antha explained, These are doenjang and gochujang. Doenjang is made from fermented soybeans, and gochujang is a paste made from chili peppers. Seeing Melissa still confused, Antha continued explaining, They're condiments from the Orient. Adding these fermented sauces will enhance the flavor of food. Melissa looked at Antha admiringly. Your Highness, you know so much. Antha explained that she had read about them in books as a child. The maid exclaimed, staring at the wall full of ingredients. Although I heard the emperor collected ingredients from all over the world for the prince, I never expected there to be so many. Recalling the steward's behavior, Antha was furious. With so many good ingredients available, they had been feeding the crown prince grass. Antha rolled up her sleeves, ready to show her skills. The skilled way she flipped the pan, and her perfect control of ingredients was completely unlike that of a child. The maid stood watching in amazement. Could the crown princess be a culinary genius? Actually, Antha had over a decade of cooking experience in her previous life. These dishes were no challenge for her. After being busy for quite a while, Antha's meal was ready. She smiled and asked the maid to call the crown prince for dinner. The food before him was unlike anything Blake had ever seen. He stared at the rice on the table, mesmerized. Antha sat nearby and explained, This is cuisine from an Eastern country. I saw the method in a book, so I tried it. Blake was both surprised and delighted that Antha had cooked for him personally. Despite his shock, he continued staring at the table, not knowing what to do. He turned to ask Antha, But how do I eat it? It turned out Blake had never eaten this kind of rice before. Antha explained the dish names while forking a round meat patty and placing it on a spoonful of rice. She held it up and asked Blake to open his mouth. Ah. Blake obediently opened his mouth like a little rabbit and ate it, then began to chew carefully. The next second, he excitedly clenched his fist. Yum! Her culinary skills now acknowledged, Antha smiled happily. Then she introduced doenjang jjigae to Blake, explaining that the soup had a strong flavor, so he shouldn't force himself if he didn't like it. Blake obediently scooped up a spoonful of soup. Antha felt a bit anxious inside. Would he like it? The flavor of this dish was indeed quite unique for people here. The moment Blake drank the doenjang jjigae, His eyes sparkled. Blake had never eaten anything so delicious. Anthia finally relaxed upon seeing that he liked it and promised to cook for him often. She rested her chin on her hand, watching Blake eat, feeling that he was less like a husband and more like a child. But that was just right, because to lift the curse, Blake needed to fall in love with Diana. For Blake's future happiness, Anthia would stay by his side until he turned 18. Actually, Anthia also wanted to lift Blake's curse, but she didn't have that ability. All she could do was protect Blake until he met Diana. The novel had written that Blake would experience 3 extremely painful events. The first was becoming the heir to the curse. The second was his wife jumping into the river on their wedding night. The third was the death of his father, Emperor Thenon. After the emperor's death, Richard's father, Blake's uncle, would ascend to the throne. Blake would be stripped of his crown prince title and exiled to the southern islands, beginning a life of displacement. Blake becoming the curse's heir was something Anthia couldn't prevent. However, Emperor Thenon was still alive, and Anthia needed to prevent his death and secure Blake's position as crown prince. Currently, the emperor had just attended Blake's wedding and was on his way to Chaos Valley. Everything would have to wait until the emperor returned. Blake truly loved the Eastern cuisine Anthia made. He wasn't just saying it was good to please her. Every time he tasted Anthia's cooking, Blake would transform into a little white rabbit, staring at her with sparkling eyes and expressing his admiration. Anthia thought that to make more authentic Eastern cuisine, they needed to build a stove pit and have a large iron wok. She decided to sketch the design of the large iron wok so the blacksmith could forge one accordingly. Anthia wandered around the palace, looking for a suitable place to put these things. As she was measuring the size of a spot, a strange man suddenly appeared behind her. "What are you doing?" Anthia was startled by the man. He extended his hand in apology.
Sorry.
"I didn't mean to scare you."